Hey, what's up everybody? This is Osabrick501 and today I want to do an overview of the Barbarian in Diablo 4. And like mentioned in my last video, this is just an overview. I plan on doing additional videos going over all of the specifics of all of the different class abilities and upgrades. It would just be way too long of a video to put them both in one. Now in Diablo 4, the Barbarian is going to be a kind of combination of the Barbarians from all of the other Diablo games that you love, kind of combined into one to give you that up close and personal berserker type of character, with tons of leaping, tons of slamming, and tons of different weapons to use. And I think the Barbarian's unique class mechanic explains the class very well. And if you don't know what these are, every class in Diablo 4 is going to have their own unique class mechanic that's going to add a lot of variety and specific class customization to that class. Now in Diablo 4, the Barbarian's unique class mechanic is the arsenal system, and this allows the Barbarian to equip 4 different weapons at the same time, and you'll always be getting the different stats and affixes on all 4 of those weapons. So the Barbarian is going to have access to more affixes and stats than all the other classes because of this. And it's seeming that these 4 different weapon slots are going to be a little bit specific on what type of weapon is going to be there. So you're going to have two-handed bludgeoning weapon, two-handed slashing weapon, main hand, and offhand. So you're going to need to follow these categories a little bit to decide what weapons you're going to want to be using. And every skill for the Barbarians are going to require a specific type of weapon. So some weapons will require a two-handed bludgeoning weapon, some weapons will just require slashing weapons, some weapons may only require a bludgeoning weapon. And when you go to use a specific ability, it will pull out that required weapon you have equipped and automatically use it. And there doesn't seem to be any animation locking or any slowing down of combat. It automatically does this and it seems pretty smooth. And you'll get the arsenal system at level 5, so you'll have it pretty early on, but there's also some unknowns about this system because there is also a technique slot that you unlock at level 15. We don't know exactly what this is, but it seems to play into the expertise system, which is another part of the arsenal system. So every different weapon that a barbarian can use, or at least most of them, are going to be able to be upgraded in expertise just by using them. It seems to be off of just hitting things with your weapons and not actually killing them, but you're able to level up weapons from 1 to 10 just by using them. And you'll be getting some specific additional effects or stats based off of the weapon, and then you get another effect once that weapon hits level 10. And the power of these effects have linear scaling, so you'll know what to expect with every new level. So to give an example, if you have a two-handed axe and you get that to rank 10, you're doing 15% increased damage to vulnerable enemies. If you're at level 1, you're going to do some smaller percent additional to vulnerable enemies. But once you hit rank 10 with that axe, you also get the additional effect of you have 10% increased critical strike chance against vulnerable enemies. Now it's also seeming like that this expertise is only applied when using an ability that uses that specific weapon. So like I mentioned, you have these 4 weapons, you're always going to have their different affixes applied to you, but these specific expertise effects are only going to be applied when using a weapon of that category. So the effects we just went over are two-handed axe, and you can have a two-handed axe equipped, but if that attack didn't use that two-handed axe, you don't get those benefits. But when you do use a two-handed axe, you'll get those additional stats versus vulnerable targets. And like I mentioned, there's the technique slot that's seeming to be somehow integrated with this expertise system, but that's information we'll need to learn closer to release of the game. Now, like all the other classes in Diablo 4, the Barbarian skills are all in one of 6 different categories. And these categories are essentially just groupings to give you a quick explanation of what you can expect from those specific skills, but you're able to mix and match any amount of any of the different category skills except the ultimate category. You're only able to use one ultimate at one time, but we'll go over more specifics with that in a bit. But first off, we have basic skills. Now, basic skills are exactly what they sound like. They're basic skills, they're spammable, they do less damage than most other skills, but specifically for the Barbarian, they generate Fury. And Fury is is the main resource for the Barbarian and the main way to use your stronger Fury spending abilities. And one example of this is Flay. It generates 9 Fury, deals physical damage, requires a slashing weapon, and when you use it, it deals some low amount of damage and inflicts a bleed over 5 seconds. So again, low damage, but generates Fury and is completely spammable. And next up, we have core skills. Now these are Fury spending abilities, do a lot more damage, and are generally what builds would be focused around much more than basic skills. These also are probably going to have a lot of legendary effects applied to them and have a lot of other effects that can augment them in the game. These generally can hit more targets than basic skills, do a lot more damage, but they generally aren't going to have massive AoE potential. They're usually much more smaller radiuses, but they usually do have higher single target damage than some of the other big AoE skills in other categories. And an example of this is Double Swing. Has a Fury cost of 25, deals physical damage, requires dual wielded weapons, and you sweep your opponents in opposite directions, dealing damage with each weapon. And enemies caught in the center are damaged by both. So again, costs Fury, deals a lot more damage, and has a cleave effect but not a massive AoE damaging effect. And next up, we have defensive skills, and they're exactly what you would expect. There's some type of defensive or utility ability that's not going to be dealing damage, but it's going to give you pretty big buffs to help your survivability or increase your damage, because some of the defensive skills for the Barbarian also will boost their damage. And this is shown pretty well in Rallying Cry. 25-second cooldown, does not have a weapon requirement because it's not an actual attack. Bellow a Rallying Cry, granting all allies, so this can be helpful for your group, giving you 30% increased movement speed and 50% increased resource generation for 6 seconds. Now it's not just Fury generation because this gives it to all of your allies, so this is one that could specifically be used for your group. And this is going to increase your survivability a bit because of movement speed and increase your damage output by a lot because you have so much more resources. But then we have something like Iron Skin that's more of a defensive ability. With a 14-second cooldown, you apply steel to yourself, gaining a barrier that absorbs 50% of your missing life for 5 seconds. So just a massive defensive skill that keeps you alive for a lot longer. And next up, we have Brawling Skills. Now these are going to seem pretty similar to the defensive category, and the main way I would say to differentiate between defensive and brawler skills is Brawling Skills are generally more based on utility, and defensive skills are still more based on defensive effects. Even though, like how we went over, some of those skills can also have offensive effects as well, but these are generally more offensive and more utility based. So for instance, we have Warcry. Bellow a mighty Warcry, you and your allies deal 15% increased damage for 8 seconds. So again, a buff for you and your allies, just straight damage increase. But then we have something like Leap, 25-second cooldown, leap forward, slam the ground, dealing damage and knocking back enemies on the surrounding impact. So a big movement ability. And again, these aren't specifically attacks, so none of these have weapon requirements attached to them, like some of the actual attacks, even though some of these deal damage like we went over with Leap. And next up, we have Weapon Mastery Skills. Now these are very hard-hitting abilities with a cooldown. So if you went to core skills, those are generally spammable but require Fury. These generally don't require Fury, still would do a lot of damage but then have a cooldown. And these aren't necessarily big AoE attacks. Some of them are really good for single target as well. So that's a general big difference between them and core abilities, is cooldown and not requiring Fury. An example of this is Death Blow. Attempt at Killing Strike, dealing very high damage to enemies in front of you. If this kills an enemy, the cooldown is reset. So this is going to be very good for single target, and you'll probably want at least one of these because it's a free ability to use when the cooldown's up and very big damage when that cooldown is up. Then finally, we have Ultimate Skills. Now like I went over, you can only have one of these chosen at the same time. And Ultimate Skills are very high cooldown, very strong abilities. And in Diablo 4, it's seeming like cooldown reduction is very hard to get, so unlike Diablo 3, you're not going to be able to spam these. They're actually going to be long cooldown abilities that are very strong that you can't just have up 100% of the time like Diablo 3. And an example of this is Iron Maelstrom. Now this is a really cool ability just just from reading the tooltip. So you activate to attach a chain to your two-handed bludgeoning weapon that you then slam the ground with, dealing pretty big damage and stunning targets for 2 seconds. You reactivate the ability a second time to attach the chain to your two-handed slashing weapon, doing a swipe in front of you, dealing damage and applying a massive bleed over 5 seconds. Then you reactivate a final time to attach that chain to your dual-wielded weapons and swing them around you, dealing pretty big damage every time you hit with those two weapons. So a bit of a complex ability, but I think this ultimate's really cool on how you get to activate it to incorporate a different set of the weapons you have equipped. So first off is your two-handed bludgeoning slot, second is your two-handed slashing slot, and third is it pulls out both your other one-handed weapons, and all the attacks do something different, and this is probably going to be a really cool looking skill. But that's the entirety of the overview of the Barbarian for Diablo 4, the quintessential Berserker or Barbarian archetype. And I think if you've enjoyed the Barbarian from any other Diablo game, you're going to enjoy this one. And like I mentioned, I'm going to do another video going over all the different abilities and their upgrades. So keep an eye out for that. So subscribe if you want to see more Diablo 4 or other videos. Leave a like if you liked the video. Leave a comment down below what you guys think about the Barbarian, and thanks for watching.